Hello class, once again it's Mr. Kablan here and I'm on the fourth lesson in chapter 7 and today we'll be looking at the third and final type of factoring uh, polynomial expression, and it's now factoring trinomials in the form of x squared plus bx plus c. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, what you probably want to have handy if multiplication tables isn't your strong suit is to have a multiplication tables uh, sheet ready, and then you can simply just go on the web, Google one up and print it off and then use it as a reference, because it'll make things move a lot smoother for this particular lesson, as well as any type of factoring for that matter. So let's get right to it and see what this involves. So in this lesson over here, actually, this type of factoring is actually referred to as several different ways. Typically, I refer to this type of factoring simply as product and sum. And the reason for that, because one of the steps involved with factoring trinomial involves finding what's called the product and the sum. So when we're looking at trinomials, it involves three terms. If you recall from the first lesson when we did FOIL, or binomial expansion, we took two brackets, we multiplied each term from the first bracket to each term in the second bracket, and we always wound up with three different terms, okay? An x squared term, an x term, and a number on its own, okay? And that's exactly what these letters represent when we use letters x squared plus bx plus c. Now, this is the part that's going to be a little bit tricky, especially if you have a hard time with multiplication tables. That's why I said before, it's nice to have the sheet ready for reference. So the first step we're going to do here is we're going to find what's called the product. And what a product is finding two numbers such that when you multiply them, okay, give you a certain number, okay? So we're going to go through that slowly. I know it's a little bit harder when it's not in the classroom, because I do approach this in a certain way on the blackboard. So again, just bear with me for this one. Now, using those same two numbers to find the product, those same two numbers, when you add them, need to give you what's called the sum. All right, so there's going to be a lot of trial and error when it comes to finding what those numbers are. But like I said, if you have the multiplication sheet in front of you, okay, this is actually not as difficult as it sounds. All right, now, once we have that, as I said before, all the types of factoring that we've looked at, okay, common factoring, difference of squares, and now factoring a trinomial, okay, these are all opposite operations of expanding. So remember in the first lesson dealing with binomial expansion or FOIL, okay, that's expanding. So this is the total opposite of that, all right? Okay, so basically what we want to do here is to understand exactly what we're doing. So I'm just going to stop this lesson here for a moment, and I'm just going to quickly just go over something from previous lesson over here. And what I'm referring to for this one here, I'm just going to pull up the very first lesson so you have a rough idea what exactly we're going to do here. So if we take a look at the first lesson, okay, I'm going to, if you have the notes in front of you, it's probably easier that way as well. And if you take a look at the first lesson here, I'm going to use the first example. Okay, so this is from the first lesson on binomial expansion. Okay, so basically what we had here in the first example, we had two brackets, and we distributed each term, the first term into each term in the second brackets, and we got something like this. So you notice that for this one, okay, we wind up here, we're getting three different terms. So in today's lesson, what we're going to do here is we're going to start off with three terms, and then we're going to wind up with two brackets that look exactly like this, obviously just with different numbers here. And that's going to be the tricky part again, because again, you just need to be you need to be a little bit quick with your multiplication tables here. All right, so let's take a look at that here in the first example. All right, so what we have here is x squared plus 5x plus 6. So I want you to just take a look at the steps here, because we will be using the exact same steps, okay? And again, as long as you see how to approach this, okay, this will make things a lot easier when you start looking at the different types of questions that we'll be looking at. So, okay, what the product is, okay, is the last term. Okay, it's always the last term. Another way to remember is that if you had a trinomial, you're looking at the number on its own. So in this case, it's a 6. Now you notice when I wrote down the product on the right side there that I included the sign, because the sign is important to determine what those two numbers are. All right, so that's going to be the product, and the sum is just the number that's attached to the x. All right, so in this case here, it's going to be the 5. So this is the hard part. You now need to find two numbers such that when you multiply them, give you 6. All right, and let's take a look at each possibility. And feel free to write them down as we go. All right, so always start off with 1. So 1 goes into 6 times. So 1 and 6 are is a possibility. Okay. Another possibility that we have is 2 and 3. Okay, because 2 times 3 is 6. All right. Now 3 also goes into 6. Okay, and it goes into 6 twice. But since we already have 2 times 3, we don't necessarily have to include that. Now we have two numbers that we can possibly work with. Okay, either 1 and 6 or 3 and 2. Now, I kept this example easy for the first part here because I want you to see here between 1 and 6 and 2 and 3, okay, of the two pairs of numbers, it's the 2 and 3 when we add them together that will give us 5. So that's why the two numbers that have a product of 6, because 3 times 2 is 6, okay, and has a sum of 5 because 3 plus 2 is 5, the two numbers there will be 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. It doesn't really matter the order. The signs are more important. All right. Now, if you got that, okay, guess what? Okay, this is not going to be as hard as it looks here. Now, that's pretty much it when it comes to figure out what the two numbers are. So how do we write this down using two brackets? Well, exactly the way you see it using these two numbers. The first bracket will be x plus 3. Okay, second bracket will be x plus 2. That's it. Now, even though this steps sound relatively simple, okay, finding out the numbers might be difficult, especially once we start throwing in the negatives in there. But then I'm gonna do a quick summary at the end of the lesson, so to make things a little bit easier when you're trying to figure out what those two numbers are. All right. Now we're just gonna do a check here, and this is gonna be familiar to you because it's exactly what we're doing here is FOIL. So when I multiply the x to the x and the x to the 2, that's going to give me x squared plus 2x. And when I multiply the 3 to the x and 3 to 2, that's going to give me 3x plus 6. So when we add the two middle terms together, guess what? That gives us x squared plus 5x plus 6, which is exactly the same thing as we started off with. All right. So I just did the check here just to show you that what we have here is indeed the correct answer. All right. Now, where it gets a little bit tricky is once you throw negatives all over the place here. So let's start off with the next one here. We have x squared plus 3x minus 4. Now, remember, when you give an expression, okay, the product is always just the number on its own, and in this case here, we have to include the sign that's in front. So the product for this expression is going to be negative 4. All right. Now the sum again is the number attached to the x that also includes the number or the sign. Sorry. So that's going to be plus 3. All right, so now it gets a little bit tricky because now we have to factor in what numbers go into, what numbers multiply to give me negative 4, okay, and then what same two numbers, okay, apply to give me positive 3. Now I'm just going to introduce you a little bit of a shortcut. Like I said, it's a little bit different how I approach this in the classroom here, but basically, anytime you have a product that is negative, I repeat, anytime you have a product that is negative, you'll always have one number that's positive and the other number being negative. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to get out of the screen here because I do want to. I do want to just try as much as possible to teach this the same way that I would in the classroom over here. So just bear with me, and let's just open up a smart notebook over here. So ignore that. Okay, so for example, we have here. Okay, we have here, sorry, product of negative 4. Okay, so I'm going back and forth. So we have a product of negative 4 over here. So let's take a look at every possibility of every combination of numbers that gives us negative 4 when we multiply them. Now, as I said before, when you have a negative product, you must always have one number that's positive and one number that is negative. All right, so you always start off with 1. All right, so when you have 1 over here, okay, another way you can approach this is you take the product and you divide it by the number that you're looking at to see what the other number is. So, for example, negative 4 divided by 1 is going to give me negative 4. Okay. Now, as I said before, one of the numbers has to be positive and one of them is negative. So we're going to use the same pair of numbers and just switch the signs around. So we were also going to look at -1, okay, and 4. All right. So that's the possibility. Okay. And remember that 4 is a negative number. So let's take a look at 2 over here. Okay. So we have 2. So -4 divided by 2 is going to give me -2. Okay. And we're just going to swap the signs over here to have us to give us -2 and 2. Because as I said earlier, anytime you have a negative product, it must be a combination of a positive and a negative. All right. Now, in this case over here, that means we have 4 possibilities of the numbers that can potentially give us the sum that we need here. So if we go back to that example, we are looking at a sum of +3. So let's now break this down in terms of which one could possibly give us that number here. So we're now looking at the combination of numbers such that when we get them, give us a sum here of +3. So let's do this step by step here. All right, so if you take a look at 1 minus 4, okay? 1 minus 4 gives me -3. So that's not it, okay? And I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to skip the next one here. So I'm going to go right to the bottom, okay? -2 plus 2 gives me 0, okay? So that ain't it. And 2 minus 2 also gives me 0. So guess what? That ain't it either. So our two numbers that when you multiply this give us -4, and when we add them give us +3, okay, is this one right here. It's going to be -1, okay, and 4. All right. So going back to the example over here, those are exactly what the two numbers are. Okay. 4 and -1, or -1 and 4. It doesn't really matter the order. Just remember what's important here are the signs. All right. So what we have here, okay, will be 4 and -1. Okay. So just double check what we did there. I'm just going to go back to my previous screen. Okay. Notice what we've done here again. Just we've broke down the numbers. Now, even though we had the -1 first here, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't really matter what the order is. What's important here are the signs. All right. Now, just double check just to make sure we're on the right track here. Okay, we're multiplying the two x's together, and the -1 gives me x squared minus 1x, and then 4 times x and 4 times -1. 4 times x gives me 4x, and 4 times -1 gives me -4. So when we group the two middle terms together, notice it gives us the same answer. All right. Okay, now, as I said before, when you're looking at the product, and the reason why I'm bringing this up because I put these two questions above and below each other for a reason. Okay. For this next one over here, don't forget we have an invisible one in front of this x. So just as a reminder, just put that in. Okay. Notice that in this example, we have a product that happens to be negative, which is -30, and a sum, which is also negative, which is -1. All right. So let's go back to the screen here, and let's see what we can do for this one here. All right. So again, we have a product of -30 and a sum of -1 here. Okay. So let's take a look at what we have for that there. Okay. So moving along. So as I said before, we have a product of -30. Okay. And we had a sum. And we had a sum of -1 there. So what we want to do here is to find out what numbers multiply to give us -30, and when we take those same two numbers to give us -1. So always start off with 1. So we have 1 and 30. Now remember that when you're looking at the combination of numbers and you have a negative product, one of them must be a positive and one of them is a negative. So when you take -30 divided by 1, that's going to give me -30. Okay, and swap the signs here. Okay, 2 goes into 30 as well, so -30 divided by 2, that's going to give me -15. Okay, so swap the numbers over here. Okay, 3 as well, so we have 3 and -10. Okay, -3 and 10. Okay, 4 doesn't go into 30, however 5 does. So we have 5 and -6. and -5 and 6. So we have a lot of possibilities here. So we have to look at every combination of numbers to see which pair of numbers is going to give us -1 when we add them. So start off with the top one. 1 minus 30, nope, that gives me -29. -1 plus 30, that gives me 29, nope. Okay, 2 minus 15, okay, that definitely doesn't give me -1 there. So that gives me -13. -2 and 15 gives me +13. 3 minus 10 gives me -7. Nope, that ain't it. -3 plus 10 gives me +7. So 5 minus 6, that gives me the -1 that we're looking for. So our two numbers here are going to be 5, okay, and -6 there. All right. So I want you to see that when you're looking at these numbers, uh, sorry, when you look at those two numbers, that's how you would break that down there. All right. So just to finish this question off here, like I said, our product here was -30. Our sum here was -1. And the two numbers that we found there were -6 and +5. Now, as you can see in both questions on this page over here, so let me finish this off. Okay, notice that both of them have a negative product. Okay, so one of the numbers was positive and one of them is negative. Okay, in both cases there. All right. Now, when we do the check over here, just to make sure we're on the right track. Okay, so x times x is x squared, and then x times 5 will give me 5x. And when I multiply the -6 of the x and then -6 of the +5, that's going to give me -6x and -30. Okay, group the two middle terms together, and that will get the same answer there. All right. So, okay, so just to do a quick recap for this one over here. Okay, what we did here was to find two numbers such that when we multiply them gave us a -30, and the same two numbers when we add them give us -1. And notice in both cases in these two examples, when you have the negative product, you will always have one number that is positive and another one that is negative. All right, moving along here. This one over here, what we have here is a positive product, okay, and a negative sum over here. All right. So let's go back to the board and break this down here. So we have a product here of 32 and a sum here of -12. So let's see how we can approach this particular question. All right. So break this part down over here. We have a product of 36. Yeah, sorry, product of 32. Okay, and a sum of -12 there. Okay, so 32 and 12. Sorry, 32 and sum of -12. All right, so let's take a look at every number. Again, you're always going to start off with a 1 over here. So 32 divided by 1, that's going to give me 32. Okay, 32 is an even number, so 32 divided by 2 gives me 16. Okay, notice that we're only looking at positive numbers here because what we have is a positive product. All right, so 3 doesn't go into 32, but 4 does. Okay, 4 goes into 32 8 times. Okay, 5 doesn't go, 6 doesn't go, 7 doesn't go. Okay, we already have the 8, so we'll stop right there. All right, now let's take a look at the three combinations of numbers here. So we have 1 and 32. So 1 plus 32, okay, that doesn't give me -12. Okay, we have 2 plus 16, which gives me 18. Well, that doesn't give us it either. Okay, 4 plus 8, okay, gives us 12, but not -12. So now I'm a little bit confused here. However, here's the trick. Okay, remember in the very first example that we had here, we have a positive product, okay, and we found the two numbers quite easily because they were two positive numbers. Here's another thing that you need to know about positive products. When you have a positive product, okay, and a negative sum, okay, both of your numbers will be negative. All right, so 4 plus 8 does give me 12, but guess what? If we take the same two numbers and make them both negative, okay, double check, -4 times -8, because when you multiply two negative numbers, it does give you a positive number. So -4 times -8 does give me positive 32. Now, -4 minus 8, guess what? That gives me -12. So you can see here when you have a positive product, okay, both of your number, a positive product and a negative sum, then both of your numbers will be negative. All right. So let's see and go back to the question that we left off with over here. So what we have here is this question. So you have 32 and negative 12 here. So as we determine, our two numbers here were negative 8 and negative 4. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So again, when you have, just to summarize what we have when it comes to positive products, basically another way to remember the numbers when you have a positive product is that when you have a positive product, okay, both of your numbers will have the same sign. So when you have a positive product and a positive sum, that means both of your numbers will be positive. If you have a positive product and a negative sum, then that means both of your numbers are negative. All right. Now, I know it's a little bit hard to gauge your mind at first with that, but that's just another way to remember that. All right. So do a quick check for this one. Okay. So we have x times x, which gives me x squared, and x times negative 4, which gives me negative 4x. We're going to take the negative 8 multiplied to the x and take the negative 8 multiplied to the negative 4. So you can see that when we do the check, when we multiply the negative 8 to the negative 4, we get the positive 32 back here. Take the two middle terms and simplify, and sure enough, we get the x squared minus 12x plus 32. All right. So we've seen the four different types of examples of factoring a trinomial here. Now, again, what you want to see here again is the approach to do it. Now, I know there's some people that can get it at a snap of a finger, but for some other people, they might take some time to do it. Okay, so whatever works for you, okay, please use that method to get the answers there. All right. And finally, we're just going to do a quick word problem here dealing with factoring. And we're looking at the dimensions of a rectangle, okay, given by the expression x squared plus 2x minus 24. Now, remember that when you're looking at the product and the sum, the product is always the number that's on its own without a letter. So in this case here, we have a product of negative 24 there. All right. And in this case here, we have a sum of positive 2. So we need to find two numbers such that when we multiply them, give us negative 24. And when we add them, give us positive 2 there. All right, so let's approach that the same fashion here. Okay, so we have a product of negative 24, and a sum of positive 2 there. All right, so just double check that there. So again, negative 24 and positive 2. Good. Okay, so going back, let's take a look at every possibility, starting off with 1 here. So remember, all you have to do here is to take the product and divide it by the number that you start off with. Now remember, since you have a negative product, okay, you must have one number that is positive and one number that is negative. That's why when you do this step here for negative products, you always look at the two different combinations here. So we have 1 and negative 24, okay, and just switch up the signs as negative 1 and 24, okay. Negative 24 happens to be an even number, so we have 2 and negative 12 and negative 2 and 12. Okay, 3 also goes into 24 here. So negative 24 divided by 3, that's going to give me negative 8. Okay, and that will give me negative 3 and 8. Okay, and last but this is the last one here. We have 4 and negative 6. Okay, and then we have negative 4 and 6. All right, so it does look like we have a lot of combinations. We have exactly 8, and we want to see which pair of numbers here, when we group them together or add them together, will give us positive 2. So let's look at each one separately here. All right, so, okay, 1 minus 24, okay, that'll give me negative 23. That ain't it. Okay, negative 1 plus 24 gives me 23. Nope. 2 minus 12 is negative 10. Okay, negative 2 plus 12 is 10. Okay, 3 minus 8, that gives me 5. Negative 3 plus 8 gives me plus 5, all right? Okay, 4 minus 6 gives me negative 2. Okay, and last but not least here, negative 4 and 6, guess what? Those are the numbers that we're looking for in this case here. So our two numbers here are going to be negative 4 and 6, all right? So you notice that even though this took a longer time to do it, ultimately we wind up getting the numbers that we need in order for us to solve this question here, all right? So again, as I said before, our two numbers here, okay, are going to be 6 and -4, okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter what order you put the numbers in. If you wrote down x minus 4 and x plus 6, that's fine as well. What's important are the signs that are in front. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to calculate the actual dimensions if x equals 40 using this expression here. So in this expression here, the length would be the first bracket and the width would be the second bracket because area is equal to length times width, okay, from just from basic geometry there. Okay, so we're going to break this down accordingly. So for the length of x plus 6, all I'm going to do here is replace the 40 in for the 6. So this particular object has a length of 46 meters. And what we have here is a width of x minus 4, which is 40 minus 4, which gives me 36 meters. All right, so that's just an application of factoring and extending it using the answer to come up with a numerical answer for an extended question there. All right, so that wraps up factoring trinomials. I know it's a lot to absorb at first here, but as long as you practice the questions that are in your book and your review package there, just keep on doing them. Again, just remember some of the patterns that we saw in today's lesson here, and I'm going to summarize it one last time here. Okay, so open up a screen, fresh screen here. So let's start off with a positive product. Okay, so when you're looking at a positive product, okay, and just to summarize it like this. Okay, anytime you have a positive product, okay, your two numbers, when you multiply them, okay, the two numbers that you get, okay, both will have the same sign. So the only combinations that you have there, okay, are going to be positive, positive, and negative. All right. Now, question is, when do we know when to use them? So, if you have a positive product, okay, and your sum is positive, that means what you have there is that both numbers, okay, will be positive. Okay, so we saw that in the first example that we saw. Okay, if the sum is negative, okay, then both numbers, okay, are negative. Okay, now when we're looking at a negative product, okay, just open up another thing here. Okay, feel free to just jot this down on the side of your notes here. So when we have a negative product, okay, and that means the p in this case here would be negative. Okay, that means that one of your numbers will be positive, so one positive number, okay, and then one negative number, okay, and it when we're looking at the whether it's a when you're looking at something that is a positive or negative sum, that's when you start playing around with the signs to see what pair of numbers will give you the sum there. Okay, just remember these are just some basic little shortcuts that you can use to make things a little bit easier. Like I said, there's no really magical technique behind this. Okay, all it requires is, again, two things. Okay, it requires just practice and patience. All right, so not only does this wrap up this particular lesson, but it also wraps up the entire chapter here. Now, don't forget that everything that you learn in this chapter is going to extend to chapter 8. So everything that you've learned in this chapter, okay, please retain it because we will be using it again in chapter 8, just using it in a different context. So until then, I will see you next time.